She buckled her sons into car seats, shifted the car into drive, and watched it roll into the lake. For 6 agonizing minutes, she stood still as water consumed the windows. That's just number 3 on our list. The woman at number 1, she makes this look tame. Right now, inside America's most secure prisons, 5 mothers sit locked away for crimes so twisted, they redefine what it means to be evil. Tonight, we're counting down these 5 cases from deadly to deadliest. And the woman in the top spot? Even hardened prison guards whisper her name in fear. By the time you learn what she did, you'll understand why some crimes don't just break laws. They fracture humanity itself. The countdown begins now, and trust me, you're not ready for number 1. Case 5, Pamela Smart. The barrel was pressed to Greg Smart's head when his life came undone. His wife had sent teenagers to kill him. May 1st, 1990. 3 teens stood in his living room. And the one holding the gun? He was sleeping with Greg's wife. But this story doesn't start with a murder. It begins with a teacher who saw opportunity in a 15-year-old's grin. 6 months earlier, Pamela Smart was spinning her web. Not in dark alleyways or shady chat rooms, but in the halls of Winnicott High School, where she worked as a media coordinator. Derry, New Hampshire was the kind of town where neighbors knew each other, where scandal was rare and trust came easy. Ideal camouflage for a predator hiding in plain sight. Her target, Billy Flynn, 15, bleached blonde, easily manipulated. She was 22, married to Greg Smart, an insurance agent who believed he'd found his forever. They lived in a modest condo, drove matching cars, smiled in photos like catalog models. But Pamela was already restless, and she was about to mold a child into a killer. The grooming followed the classic pattern. You're so mature, Billy. My husband doesn't understand me the way you do. Fall turned to winter. After school chats became something darker. She made him feel special. Chosen. Grown up. The power gap wasn't just visible. It was a chasm. She was the adult, the authority figure. He was a confused boy, still figuring out life. By Christmas, he was completely under her spell. But here's the twist. She wasn't just having an affair. She was assembling an army. Billy brought in friends. Pete Randall, 17. J.R. Latam, 17. Raymond Fowler, 16. Teenagers who should have been thinking about prom and graduation. Instead, they were plotting a murder. Pamela cast herself as a victim. Greg's abusive, she claimed. He's controlling, dangerous. He'll never let me leave, she whispered to Billy. Unless she never had to finish the sentence. The idea took root in Billy's mind like rot. Greg didn't need to be divorced. He needed to vanish. Permanently. Pamela secured her alibi. A school admin meeting. May 1st, 7 p.m. on the dot. While Pamela discussed school budgets and smiled at colleagues, her teenage assassins made their move. They entered the Smart condo through the basement. Greg came home expecting a quiet evening. Instead, he found 3 boys and a gun. Get on your knees. Billy's voice trembled. Still a kid, even while wielding a weapon, they forced Greg down. Billy pressed the gun to the back of his skull. 1 shot. Quick. Cold. Final. Greg Smart died on his own floor, never knowing the full scope of his wife's betrayal. But what was supposed to be the perfect murder quickly unraveled. Pamela's performance as the grieving widow was convincing. At first, she told police it must have been a botched burglary. She wept on cue, said all the right things. But teens make lousy killers. They brag, they crack, they confide in girlfriends who tell friends, who tell parents. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Cecilia Pierce, a student intern working with Pamela. She started recording their conversations. What she captured was chilling. Pamela, speaking coldly, more concerned about getting caught than about the man she'd lost. In one recording, her voice detached and icy, Pamela said, "This would have been the perfect murder if those kids could just keep their mouths shut. No sorrow, no guilt, just irritation that her plan was falling apart. The mask was gone." Today, Pamela Smart remains in Bedford Hills Correctional Facility in New York. Life without parole. In 2025, New Hampshire's governor denied her request for a reduced sentence hearing, keeping her behind bars. Billy Flynn, the teen she manipulated and weaponized, was paroled in June 2015 after 25 years. Pamela never pulled the trigger, but she destroyed lives with words and lies. And she did it all by turning trust into a weapon. Case 4, Celeste Beard Johnson. The Austin Country Club in 1993 was where Texas oil money came to relax and make deals. Stephen Beard commanded the room. At 70, he was everything Celeste Johnson wasn't. Established, rich, admired. She was 32, waiting tables at the country club restaurant, watching the wealthy enjoy dinners that cost more than her rent. But Celeste had something Stephen wanted: youth, beauty, and the promise of companionship in his twilight years. To Stephen, she was a second shot at happiness. To Celeste,
if you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video.
He was something else entirely: security, status, and a bank account with endless zeros. Their relationship moved fast. In no time, the waitress had become the wife of one of Austin's wealthiest men. Marriage brought her a $35,000 monthly allowance, but Celeste spent far more. Designer labels, flashy jewelry, high-end cars. If she wanted it, she got it. Stephen's cards had no limits, and Celeste tested everyone. But the one thing money couldn't buy her was freedom. Stephen was kind, but he wasn't naive. He noticed the spending, asked questions, talked about budgeting and accountability. To Celeste, each conversation felt like another chain. By 1998, the dream was crumbling. She filed for divorce, claiming the relationship was over. Then she changed her mind. Maybe Stephen promised to change. Maybe she realized a prenup would slash her inheritance. They reconciled, divorce canceled, but the damage was done. In early 1999, Celeste checked into St. David's Medical Center for Depression and Anxiety. It was supposed to be a place for recovery. Instead, it became her hunting ground. Tracy Tarleton, a bookstore clerk battling her own demons, was desperate for connection. Celeste found her first. What happened next depends on the source. Celeste claimed they were simply friends. Tracy misunderstood friendly gestures. Tracy painted a different picture. Phone calls, secret meetings, promises of a shared future once Stephen was gone. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, but the result was deadly. By the time they left the facility, Tracy believed she was fighting for love, and Celeste had found a pawn. October 2nd, 1999. Stephen Beard was sleeping soundly in his mansion bedroom. He never heard the intruder slip through the door. The shotgun blast tore into his stomach, bones shattered, organs destroyed. But it didn't kill him right away. Stephen survived the shot, conscious enough to call for help. Paramedics found him bleeding, barely hanging on. He fought for life in the hospital. Surgeries, infections, complications his aging body couldn't withstand. Celeste played the devoted wife flawlessly. Daily visits, hand-holding, public tears. But beneath the surface, she was already moving on. When Stephen died in January 2000, Celeste stood to inherit millions. She got what she wanted, or so she thought. Investigators started with a simple question: how did the intruder know exactly where Stephen's room was? The answer led straight to Tracy Tarleton. She was arrested quickly and her story unraveled. But instead of staying silent, Tracy confessed. She claimed Celeste had masterminded the murder, promising love, escape, and a life together. In March 2003, Celeste Beard Johnson was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. She's currently at the Christina Melton Crane Unit in Texas, eligible for parole in 2042, 2 decades in, and she still insists she's innocent. But the evidence tells another tale, one of a woman who turned romance into murder and trust into a weapon. Case 3, Susan Smith. October 25th, 1994. Union, South Carolina. Susan Smith stood before television cameras, her voice trembling. A black man took my car with my babies inside. The story seemed tragically simple. A mother halted at a red light, a stranger brandishing a gun, and 2 young children whisked away into the night. For 9 agonizing days, the nation watched as Susan pleaded for the return of her sons, 3-year-old Michael and 14-month-old Alexander. Their faces dominated news broadcasts and graced the front pages of every major paper. Susan stood beside her estranged husband David, tears streaming down her face, begging the kidnapper to return her babies safely. "They need their mommy," she murmured into the cameras. All of America searched for the missing boys, everywhere except the one place that mattered, because the only person who knew where Michael and Alexander Smith were was standing right there, in front of the cameras, weeping crocodile tears. The grieving mother was also their killer. The confession came on November 3rd, after 9 days of deception. Susan Smith finally revealed the truth about that night at John D. Long Lake. She had driven there alone, her 2 sons strapped securely in their car seats. She placed a Mazda in drive, then stepped out. The car crept down the boat ramp, inching toward the lake's dark surface. For 6 horrifying minutes, the vehicle sank, its headlights glowing underwater like dying stars. Inside, Michael and Alexander were trapped. The water rose around them, from their feet to their waists and higher. Susan could have waited. She could have shattered a window. She could have saved them. Instead, she did nothing, watching as the car disappeared beneath the surface. Then, she ran to a nearby home and falsely reported a carjacking. The confession stunned the nation. This was a mother who chose to end her children's lives over a man she was desperate to keep. Tom Finley had everything Susan wanted: wealth, good looks, and prestige. He came from one of Union's most respected families. But Tom had made it clear he didn't want children. Not hers. Not anyone's. In a letter dated October 17, 1994, he firmly expressed his unwillingness to take on the responsibility of raising her sons. Susan read his words and made a decision no one could fathom. She had battled depression for years, endured failed relationships, financial stress, a pending divorce, and an affair that offered escape but only added pressure. Yet millions of single mothers face similar hardships without drowning their children. In her confession, Susan claimed she wasn't thinking clearly. "I was not in my right mind," she told investigators. But the evidence painted a different picture. Her drive to the lake was intentional. Her lies to police were strategic. Her emotional TV appearances were pure performance. And 30 years behind bars haven't changed her. In 2000, she was caught having sexual relationships with 2 prison guards, both of whom lost their jobs. Drug violations followed. Incidents of self-harm continued. Her disciplinary record revealed a woman still struggling to manage her own behavior. The same woman who once manipulated an entire nation was still trying to control her world. In November 2024, Susan faced her first parole hearing. She had served the mandatory 30 years of her life sentence. It was denied. The parole board cited her persistent behavioral issues, her lack of sincere remorse, and the horrifying nature of her crimes. David Smith, her ex-husband, has never stopped fighting to keep her behind bars. At that hearing, he addressed the board directly. "She chose to take our boys' lives. That choice must carry consequences forever." David made a chilling vow, one that haunts Susan to this day. "I will be here every 2 years going forward, every parole hearing, every chance for release. He'll be there to remind the world what Susan took." Her next parole hearing is scheduled for November 2026. She'll be 53, still young enough to live outside prison walls. But if David Smith keeps his word, that life may never happen. Case 2, Diane Downs. May 19, 1983, Old Mohawk Road, Springfield, Oregon. The country road was empty, except for one car, carrying a mother and her 3 children home from visiting a friend. 8-year-old Christy sat in the front passenger seat. 7-year-old Cheryl and 3-year-old Danny were in the back. It was nearly 10 p.m. Then the car stopped. What happened next would shatter 3 young lives and expose a mother's unthinkable betrayal. A .22 caliber pistol fired at least 5 times in rapid succession. Christy took a bullet to the chest, the impact slamming her small body against the car door. Cheryl was struck twice in the back, the bullets piercing vital organs. Little Danny was shot in the spine, the bullets severing nerves that would never heal. Diane herself was grazed in the left forearm, a wound far too convenient to be coincidence. But the most chilling detail wasn't the violence itself. It was who pulled the trigger. Late that night, Diane Downs sped into the emergency bay at Mackenzie Willamette Hospital. Her car was splattered with blood. "Somebody just shot my 3 kids," she screamed to medical staff. But something was off. With her story and with her, Diane's account was vivid and detailed. A bushy-haired stranger had flagged down her car on that lonely road. When she stopped to help, he demanded her keys. When she refused, he opened fire on her children and grazed her arm. She described him perfectly: height, weight, clothing, even the sound of his voice. But investigators noticed something disturbing about Diane's behavior. No hysteria, no breakdown, no mother's anguish. She answered questions calmly, almost clinically. She seemed more concerned with getting her story straight than with her children's condition. As detectives pressed her for details, her story began to unravel. First, the stranger wanted money. Then, he wanted the car. Then, he was just angry and started shooting randomly. The location changed. The timeline shifted. The stranger's appearance evolved with each telling. But Diane's demeanor? It never changed. Cool, controlled, almost detached. Experienced investigators had seen grief take many forms. But they had never seen a mother lose 1 child to death and 2 to critical injuries, and react like she was discussing the weather. Something was very wrong with Diane Downs. 7-year-old Cheryl died within hours of arriving at the hospital. 3-year-old Danny survived, but the bullet left him paralyzed from the waist down. A toddler who would never walk again. Christy, the oldest, suffered the most complex injuries: a collapsed lung and a massive stroke. For weeks, she couldn't speak, couldn't move the right side of her body. While her children fought for their lives, Diane gave interviews. She appeared on television, calmly discussing the attack. She posed for newspaper photos, her expression more curious than grief-stricken. When reporters asked about her children, she spoke of them like distant relatives, not her own flesh and blood. The community was horrified, not just by the crime, but by the mother's bizarre reaction. The case broke open when detectives found Diane's diary. Page after page revealed her obsession with a married man named Lou Lewiston, a man who had made it clear he didn't want children in his life. "I love Lou so much," she wrote, "but he doesn't want kids around." The entries grew darker as their relationship soured. She mused that without her children, she might finally have the life she wanted. Forensic evidence sealed her fate. Ballistics matched the bullets in her children's bodies to a .22 caliber pistol in Diane's possession. Gunpowder residue on her hands proved she'd fired a weapon recently. But the most damning evidence came from the unlikeliest source: Christy Downs. Despite her stroke and speech impairment, Christy slowly recovered, and as her memory returned, so did the truth. In a courtroom packed with reporters and horrified spectators, 9-year-old Christy took the witness stand. Her words were halting, difficult to understand, but unmistakable. She identified her own mother as the shooter. The courtroom erupted. Diane showed no emotion. Even faced with her daughter's testimony, she maintained her innocence with chilling calm. In 1984, Diane Downs was convicted of murder and attempted murder. She received life plus 50 years. But prison couldn't contain her narcissism. In July 1987, she escaped from the Oregon Women's Correctional Center. For 10 days, she evaded capture while authorities launched a massive manhunt. She was found in a house in West Salem, just 5 miles from the prison, still maintaining her innocence, still blaming the mysterious stranger. Today, Diane Downs sits in the Central California Women's Facility, now 69 years old. In November 2024, she filed a petition for post-conviction relief and a retrial, her latest attempt to challenge a conviction that stood for over 40 years. She was denied parole in 2010. No new hearings have been scheduled as of 2025. Psychiatric evaluations have diagnosed her with narcissistic and antisocial personality disorders, noting her total lack of genuine remorse. Christy and Danny, now adults, were adopted by a loving family. They built private lives despite their mother's betrayal. They've never visited her in prison. They've never forgiven her. Diane Downs destroyed her own children to chase a fantasy of love. Case 1. Lori Vallow Daybell, the Doomsday Mother. Rexburg, Idaho was a kind of place where neighbors knew each other's names and children played safely in front yards. In 2019, Lori Vallow seemed to fit right in, a devoted mother to 3 children, including 7-year-old JJ Vallow and 16-year-old Tylee Ryan, a blended family that looked picture-perfect from the outside. JJ was autistic, requiring extra attention and care. Lori appeared to handle his needs with patience and love. Tylee was a typical teenager, navigating high school and dreaming about her future. To their neighbors, the Vallows were just another family trying to make it work. But beneath the surface, something dark was festering. Lori had become obsessed with end times prophecies and religious podcasts preaching about the coming apocalypse. She spent hours listening to Preparing a People, absorbing doomsday theories and tales of spiritual warfare. Her friends noticed a change. Conversations that once centered on family and daily life now fixated on visions, revelations, and a cosmic battle between good and evil. No one could have imagined where these beliefs would lead, or that JJ and Tylee were already living on borrowed time. The transformation escalated in 2018 when Lori met Chad Daybell at a religious conference. Chad was a self-published author of apocalyptic fiction. Though to his followers, his books weren't fiction. They were prophecy. He preached about dark spirits that could possess people, turning them into zombies. They looked human, he said, but their souls were gone. The only way to release them? Death. It was a theology terrifying in its convenience, especially for someone planning murder. Lori embraced Chad's teachings with chilling enthusiasm. Soon, she began seeing dark spirits everywhere, especially in those who stood between her and Chad. Her husband, Charles Vallow, became a dark spirit when he questioned her beliefs. Chad's wife, Tammy, became one when she refused to step aside for their affair. Eventually, and horrifyingly, JJ and Tylee were labeled dark spirits too. In Lori's twisted worldview, killing them wouldn't be murder. It would be mercy, liberating their souls from demonic control and sending them to a better place. Chad only fed the delusion, telling Lori they were chosen warriors in God's army. Their mission? To cleanse the world of evil before Christ's return. Anyone who opposed them was an enemy of God. Anyone who got in the way had to die. September 8th, 2019, Yellowstone National Park. The last known photo of Tylee Ryan shows her smiling at the camera. She was with Lori, JJ, and Lori's brother, Alex Cox. It looked like a normal family trip, but Tylee never came home. Within days, JJ was pulled out of school. Lori told administrators she was homeschooling him, that they were moving to be closer to family. It was a lie. JJ was already dead. Still, Lori kept up the act. She smiled at church, attended social events, even started openly dating Chad while his wife was still alive. When neighbors asked about the kids, she had answers ready. JJ was staying with relatives. Tylee was away at college. Eventually, she stopped mentioning them at all. When pressed, she claimed she had no minor children. 2 kids who had once been the center of her world had vanished from her life entirely. In October, she abandoned a storage unit filled with the children's belongings, toys, clothes, school supplies, everything that proved they had ever existed. She left it all behind like forgotten relics. By November, Lori had married Chad in Hawaii, smiling on beaches, celebrating their new life together, while the bodies of their spouses were barely cold. June 9th, 2020, Salem, Idaho. FBI agents arrived at Chad's property with ground-penetrating radar. They were looking for children's remains on the 5-acre lot. They didn't have to search long. Near a fire pit, they found charred bone fragments and melted metal, the remains of Tylee, who had been dismembered and burned. JJ was buried deeper. His small body was wrapped in plastic and duct tape. He had been restrained and likely suffocated. But JJ and Tylee weren't the only victims. Chad's wife, Tammy, died in October 2019. At first, her death was ruled natural, but it was murder. She had survived a bizarre earlier attack by a masked man wielding a paintball gun. When that failed, Chad finished the job with his bare hands. The autopsy confirmed it. She had been asphyxiated. Then there was Charles Vallow, Lori's husband, shot to death by her brother Alex Cox in July 2019. Alex claimed self-defense, said Charles had attacked him with a baseball bat. But investigators now believe it was a premeditated murder orchestrated by Lori to cash in on Charles's life insurance. Alex Cox himself died in December 2019. The cause? Officially natural. But suspicions remain. Was he silenced or simply another casualty in a trail of chaos? One by one, everyone who threatened Lori and Chad's relationship ended up dead. Husbands, wives, children, even accomplices. It was a killing spree cloaked in religious devotion. In 2023, Lori Vallow Daybell was sentenced to life without parole for the murders of JJ, Tylee, and Tammy. In April 2025, she was convicted in Arizona for conspiracy to commit the murder of Charles Vallow. She remains defiant, insisting she was following God's will, still claiming she was saving the world from evil. Chad Daybell was convicted in May 2024 and sentenced to death the following month. The doomsday they preached never came. But for JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan, the world ended in September 2019. 2 children lost the most twisted form of religious fanaticism imaginable. Their mother once called herself a prophet. History will remember her as something else entirely. A monster who used God's name to justify the unthinkable, and who destroyed her own family in pursuit of love that was never worth the price. Thanks for watching another deep dive into the darkest corners of human nature. If this video made you think, hit that like button. If you want more cases that challenge everything you thought you knew about crime, subscribe and ring the notification bell. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous person in your life is the one you'd never suspect.